Lot and the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Abraham continued, I left Egypt as a rich man. I had numerous camels, cows, sheep, horses, slaves, gold, silver, and countless valuable things. I shared the wealth with Lot. Returning to Canaan, Lot started to make some trouble. Greed slumbered in Lot's nature, so that this anger could not be avoided. I separated from him and asked him to move away. He went to Sodom, but we kept contact with each other. Before I talk about my life, I would like to say something about Lot. In fact, I am his uncle. He was my brother's son who died in Ur. I adopted him. When I had to leave my home, forced by the king of Babylon, I took him with me. I taught him about God's will and invested a lot in him. Lot was also the man who was always looking for mistakes in me. He was not so much a man of God, but rather attracted by worldly things. If I had not taken care of him from childhood on, I don't know how he would have led his life. After the events in Egypt, Lot criticized Sarah many times, what poisoned the family atmosphere. For this reason, Sarah was against sharing the possessions that we had only obtained through Sarah's great sacrifice in Egypt. Still, I did. This led to many big discussions between me and Sarah. However, for Lot, the given possessions were not enough. I could hardly believe that he asked more of me and that he was so dissatisfied. That is why there were persistent tensions between me and him and between our people. I asked him to go before there will be more trouble. If I had to force him to leave, I could have destroyed our whole relationship. I said to Lot, you know, there was only one purpose in my life, to do God's will. I shared everything with you, although nothing belongs to you. I thought you were my son. What are you doing now? You become more and more greedy for worldly things that are temporary. You should unite with me to do God's will. Instead of understanding me, Lot only defended his behavior. Days later, he came to me and said he wanted rather to live more in the east of the kingdom, where there was less desert and more green valleys. I told him that I could not leave Canaan because of my mission. In my heart, however, I wanted him to stay with me. I educated him so that he could do something for the mission, but he refused and wanted to live his own life. I asked him, Lot, now we have no financial problems. If you really want to move east, you should take God's will with you and educate the people there. However, he did not give me a satisfactory answer and left me. I got very sad about this. I had wished and hoped that he would be my right hand in the mission. But here he left me. I had to realize that he was going to make a lot of trouble for me, so I let him go finally. If man is not connected to God and does not live for the benefit of others, his wealth becomes his greatest enemy. This also happened to Lot. He took many of the people who I had prepared for the mission with him. I cried and asked God what I should do in this situation. I said to our Creator, it has been very difficult to prepare people for you, and it's even more sad if they turn away from you. One night, while watching the many stars in the sky, I wondered if there's one among all these stars who can bring the light of God to this world. As this thought occupied my heart, I heard a voice from heavens, Abraham, O Abraham, Can you count the stars at the sky? I asked, how should this be possible? The voice replied, among your descendants will be countless stars that bring light into the world. Abraham, you will be the father of faith who opened the door and paved the way for them. There will be much greater children in your lineage who will bring salvation to the world. O Abraham, they will come very close to God's heart. They will develop such a high spiritual level that people will look up to them just like you to the stars in the night. At this point, Abraham stopped talking and cried very much. I, the author of this book, took him in my arms and said to him, Abraham, O father of faith, it was your faith and love in your heart that enabled the heavens to fulfill their promise through your descendants. Abraham looked at me as he spoke, Zahid, I want to see much more. This earth should be filled with God's children, and God should be everything for them. This is the only way that Satan has to leave them alone. Zahid, since God gave you the mission, I have a great hope in you that through you as an instrument of God and as the bearer of hope, the heavens can fulfill the will of God. So, I was deeply moved to talk to you about my life and the will of God. I was waiting a few thousand years to talk to a man like you who came so close to God's heart that for the first time God revealed many secrets about himself. This will be a great privilege for mankind and heavens. I said to Abraham, you know, I love you and I am proud to be one of your descendants. You enabled me to get to know God's heart in the most wonderful way. Abraham embraced me very tightly and said, I will tell you all about my life. It is up to you whether you write everything down or just the essentials. Whenever you feel the need to reveal some of the secrets of my life to mankind, don't hesitate to do it. God and I agree wholeheartedly. I know this is for the sake of humanity. They should know the hidden truth so they can get to know themselves, their neighbors, and the will of God deeper. Abraham continued to speak about Lot. I unconditionally supported Lot in everything he expected me to do. Lot's attitude towards life was, if someone gives him something, he also gives. If the others don't give anything, they have nothing to expect from him. While he was living in Sodom, the surrounding kings started war with each other to expand their kingdom. The kingdom of Sodom and Gomorrah lost the war against the other kings. Lot, his family, and the people were captured. All their possessions were taken away, and they were enslaved. When I got this news, I risked my life to free Lot, his family, and the other people. Among them were some well-known residents of Sodom. This event raised my reputation in the other kingdoms and earned me the respect of the king of Sodom. I tried to inspire Lot again for the will of God by saying, See how everything was taken from you, your family, your possessions, your people, and almost your life. However, God helped you through my hand. You should learn your lesson from it and only do the will of God, so that at the end of your life you will be the happiest man. All the fortune will follow you in your life and in eternal life after death. He listened to me for a while and decided to do the missionary work again in Sodom. I was very happy that he would finally bring the blessing to Sodom. After some time, the people in Sodom frustrated Lot again. In various cases, Lot was just as short-tempered as Noah. He quickly got angry if things did not work out for him. One day he came to me and asked for advice. What should I do? Sodom's people are against me, as if I were their enemy. The more I emphasize to change society, the more they persecute me. Sodom and Gomorrah also want other kingdoms to allow homosexuality. You know, Abraham, it is against God's will. I answered, I know, you are right. Things are so messed up right now that we cannot control them. So let us keep doing our mission work. This is our top priority. First of all, people have to get to know God. Then we can tell them what to do in this life. We must first get people who are interested in God on our side. We can clarify other things later. Once people know more about God, more reality can take place in their lives because they will have many spiritual experiences. Lot replied, This will take a lot of patience. I told him, We will fulfill our part first. God will take care of the rest. God has always fulfilled his part, only the prophets, not their parts. Lot was silent, but his wife started to argue with me. What you ask Lot to do is too much. I and Lot don't have time to lead a normal family life with our children and relatives. It wasn't the first time that she stood up for Lot and started to argue with me. So I said to her, You are so unthankful people towards God. God gave you so much blessings through me, and he saved your life through me at the last moment. I released you from the other king's army. This should be more than a sign for you to follow God's will. The more you get, the more you ask. You are so unthankful. You should consider yourself lucky that you have been given the opportunity by God to serve your fellow man. Lot's wife replied, Abraham, nobody can be like you. You alone are enough for God. Not everyone can live day and night for the will of God. Abraham, you have to be more normal and realistic. I told her, I am more normal and realistic than anyone else on earth. I know many realities that are waiting for you in the future, but then it will be too late. You will be alone there, and no one among of your family will be there to help you. Then you will get to know countless bitter realities. I am sorry, but I will not be there to help you. She replied, If this time comes, we will see what to do. I said, As you wish, but you are not a good wife for Lot. One day he will have difficulties in eternal life because of you. Lot sat next to her and listened, but he didn't like what I said. He told me, Abraham, you shouldn't accuse my family before me. I replied, As you wish. I don't think I can tell you anything about God's will that you don't know already. You have learned a lot from me. Your ignorance is greater than your faith. They then returned to Sodom, but were very unhappy with me. Lot didn't follow my advice. Instead of teaching about God, he started criticizing the people of Sodom, especially their homosexuality and morality. This angered the people, and they didn't want to tolerate his behavior anymore. He shouldn't interfere in such a way their lifestyle. They were extremely against him and started to persecute him. They said to Lot, You came to this country as a stranger to live here, and now you want to rule us. At the same time, you have many bad wishes for us, for example, that God will destroy us. Leave our country, or we will teach you a lesson if you don't stop talking to us so fanatically and cursing us." After this argumentation, Lot no longer felt the desire to stay in Sodom. People were against him anyway. Especially the homosexuals were extremely upset and wanted to kill him. Lot cursed them, saying, "God will punish you for your bad deeds." The angels showed me in 2 visions that they wanted to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. But this should not happen during my lifetime as a prophet on this earth. So I traveled to Sodom, where Lot lived. I gave public speeches on how to bring peace and dialogue between believers and unbelievers. I told the homosexuals that they have no right to force others to homosexuality because it is against the natural law, the principle, and God's truth. I insisted on my point of view in this dialogue, and finally we agreed on certain points. At least, there should be no violence from the opposing parties. The homosexuals said, "Lord can talk freely about spiritual things, but we won't allow him to criticize and change our views." In the past, people on both sides died. I wanted to prevent this from happening again. I also shared my vision with the king of Sodom, pointing out that he had to take special care of the morality of his kingdom. I told him that God and the heavens could only help him if he wasn't on the wrong side as a king. The king did not pay much attention to my message. So I asked him, "What will happen if your kingdom will be punished by the angels?" He asked me how I could be so sure that this would ever happen. I told him that I know much through God and heavens, and with the grace of God I can travel in the spiritual world. The king told me, "Abraham, I respect you as a businessman and your worldly views. I know you have accomplished a lot in this country so far. Do not tell me any fairy tales now, otherwise I will lose my respect for you." I replied, "King of Sodom and Gomorrah, you have to take this matter very seriously." He asked me, "Are you the king or I?" I answered, "You are the king." And he went on, "I have to rule this country and not you. I have to take care of my country's affairs, and now you can go." I said, "I wish you and your country all the best. However, it seems to me that I am too small and low in your eyes to accept the truth from me." I returned with a very heavy heart to Canaan. But still I had the hope that both sides would keep the agreements I made with them. I needed this time for my mission to bring it forward by reaching the people to whom I could explain the vision of God. In Canaan, I prayed tearfully to God, how much more time has to pass in human history before mankind learns its lesson and does not make the same mistakes again? What should I do for the people of this world who are living in such ignorance? How can I save Sodom and Gomorrah from destruction? I heard God's voice saying, "Abraham, I know the situation you are going through. If you unite with me and do what I tell you, you will surely bring new hope and lay the right foundation to save mankind. Abraham, be patient. Walk on my path with a humble heart and complete your spiritual journey as a perfect man. So I can make you to a channel for human beings." 3 months later, I was sitting in front of my tent one afternoon, thinking about God when 3 angels appeared before me. All 3 covered their faces. When I saw them, I was afraid. They said to me, "Abraham, don't be afraid of us. We will go to Sodom and Gomorrah. Evil has taken possession of everyone. We will prevent the people of Sodom and Gomorrah from spreading this evil disease. We will use them to set an example for other nations so that they can learn a lesson from it. When I heard this, I became very sad and asked, "But what if there are still some righteous people living there? What about Lot and his followers?" The angels said, "If we will find some righteous people there, we will not destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, and we will also save Lot's life because of you." I replied, "Perhaps you will only find 50 righteous people, or only 40, or maybe only 10. The 3 angels listened to me very calmly and said, "Abraham, do you want to say something else, or are you finished?" "Even if we will find only 10 righteous people in Sodom and Gomorrah, we will not destroy anything. Abraham, you are a very special person for God." Then they left me. I was satisfied and believed that I had saved Sodom and Gomorrah from destruction, because surely 10 sincere people would be found there. A few days later, I woke up in the morning at my usual prayer time. I wanted to go to the mountains to pray there. Suddenly, I saw a huge black cloud of smoke rising from the east of the sky. Fear spread through my heart because there Sodom and Gomorrah were located. I knew that the destruction through the angels had begun. I cried for the people of Sodom, Lot, and his followers. Immediately I went to Sodom with some of my people. When I arrived, a picture of horror appeared before me. There was a huge black hole where Sodom once stood. The sight was so terrifying that I could not stay there any longer. I said to my people that we should leave this place behind us as quickly and as far as possible. I could spiritually smell that the angels of death were still there. I returned without having found out what had happened to Lot and his people. After my prayer to God, I dreamed that Lot had managed to escape in time. I searched for him everywhere, but could not get any information about him. I never gave up hope, because I knew that the heavens would never lie to me. 6 months later, I was told that Lot had been found. But Lot didn't want to have anything to do with us. Lot lived very far away with his 2 daughters in a small village called Zoar in the east. I couldn't understand that Lot refused to have contact with us. So I wanted to visit him myself. When he heard that I was standing in front of his door, he didn't want to open it. He shouted angrily from inside that he didn't want to see people like me. At first, I was very shocked. I couldn't go without talking to him. So I called out, "Lord, open the door and give me the chance to speak with you for the last time." He shouted, "Abraham, you better get lost from here. I do not want to see your face one more time. You brought misery to me, my family, and my people. Your God destroyed all of them." This was a very sad moment for me listening to him. That was not the Lord I knew. I called out again, "Come out, I want to see your face. Then you can tell me whatever you want." But he didn't open his door. After a while, his 2 daughters came out and said to me, "Our father doesn't want to talk to you. What do you want from him? Isn't it enough that we lost our family, our possessions, and our people because of you? Do you want to bring more bad luck into our lives?" They started to cry and insulted me. I returned to Canaan without seeing Lot. Later on, I asked Sarah to visit Lot and his 2 daughters. She answered me, If he didn't open the door for you, why should he do it for me? After what you did for him and how he treats you now, he died for me. I thought about visiting him again. This time, however, I proceeded wiser. First, I sent my messenger to Lot, who told him the following. Abraham lets you know that he cannot bring your loved ones back, but a possession which you lost. So, the rest of your life, you no longer have to worry about what you will eat and drink tomorrow. When he heard the news that I would share my property with him, he was finally ready to meet me. I went to see him again. This time, he opened the door and let me in. He immediately apologized for his behavior of the last time. I said to Lot that I would prefer to speak to him alone. He agreed. I said, Lot, you know I met God and he also gave me the mission. You was very inspired by God's will many times in your life. God also showed you many visions about the special world. Please tell me now what really happened to you, your family, your people, and the kingdom of Sodom and Gomorrah. I want to hear it from your mouth. Then I will ask God if it is all true. He started to cry. He said, Oh Abraham, why do you want to know everything? Isn't it enough that from now on I will mourn my whole life because of this pain? If you really want to do me one last favor, help me financially. Thank you that you helped me to overcome financial crises so many times in the past. This is the last time I ask for this help. I replied, Lot, I didn't come here because of your financial problems. I came here to talk to you about God's will. It is time for you to feel God's will in your bones. But first I want to know why Sodom and Gomorrah received this punishment, because you were there and should lead Sodom and Gomorrah as the central person of God on the right path. The angels promised me if they would find 10 righteous people there, they would not destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. You know that over 600,000 people lived in these cities. I cannot simply ignore this fact. I promised that if you tell me the whole truth about Sodom and Gomorrah, I will help you. This is also my condition so that I can help you financially. Otherwise, I won't do it. Lot said to me, Let's go to a quiet place in the mountains where we are alone. We went very far into the mountains until we reached a place where there was nothing but stones. Only there did he relax and feel free. Then he told me, Abraham, if I really tell you the whole truth, I am afraid that you don't want to have anything to do with me. My conscience tells me that I am guilty and responsible for what happened in Sodom and Gomorrah. I replied, Tell me everything for the sake of future humanity. One day, mankind must get to know the hidden truth why God's will was not fulfilled through the prophets. Lot began, Abraham, when I was a child you adopted me as your own son. You have guided me on the path of God all my life. I know myself that there was a time in my life when I was so inspired to do nothing but the will of God. God and the heavens also gave me a lot of inspiration, revelations, and visions. I cannot deny this reality that I saw with my own spiritual eyes. But then came a time in my life when I started to doubt about the visions from God and heavens. I could not find a base to relate the visions shown to me to my fellow man and myself. Since I got married and started a family, I left the spiritual path more and more. My wife and family had a bad influence on me and raised grief against you in my heart. That's why I didn't want to stay with you. This was also the reason why I gave you a lot of trouble. I wanted you to send me away, even though you shared all of your wealth with me. When you realized that under no circumstances did I want to stay with you, you asked me to start a mission in Sodom and Gomorrah. Unfortunately, I agreed with you, but in my heart I didn't want to have anything to do with your mission. My family and my people felt the same way. Later, you freed us from the slavery of the other king and thereby risked your own life. We were very thankful to you in our hearts for it, but that inspiration didn't last very long. After a while, we turned away from your mission again. I started criticizing the moral attitudes of the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. We used the money, which you continued to send, to advance the mission in Sodom and Gomorrah for ourselves. That's why we didn't want to face you, because we had a guilty conscience. We started to despise the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. This increased almost to hatred. We cursed the homosexuals and cursed Sodom and Gomorrah by saying, if we had only the power, we would fight against evil and bring Sodom and Gomorrah to their fair punishment. But we were too weak, and we had not enough people to do anything in this country. The angels appeared to me many times and asked me to pray for forgiveness for the people of these cities. But I felt no sympathy for them. I ignored all the revelations of the angel world. In the eyes of God, I didn't take responsibility for these people. Here, I failed in my mission. My heart closed for the mission because of my own bad sins. I know you are the only person who can ask God for forgiveness for me so that my soul can be healed. I replied, tell me what you did so badly that your sons, your wife, your sons-in-law, and all of your people had to die on the judgment day in Sodom and Gomorrah. Lord continued, while I continued to pursue the mission, my wife turned away from me and the mission. All of my sons, daughters, and sons-in-law laughed at my mission. In the meantime, I have also committed a great sin in the eyes of God and heavens. I slept with my younger daughters many times before the day of judgment came over Sodom and Gomorrah. The heavens often want me to stop with such an evil sin. I asked for forgiveness every time, but I made the same mistake over and over again. Exactly these two younger daughters wanted me to talk more about God and the mission. Because of my own sin, I couldn't. There came a time later when I was even unable to pray. I distanced myself more and more from God and the heavens. 3 days before the judgment of Sodom and Gomorrah took place, I already saw a vision about the destruction of these cities through the angels. I never thought that my wife, children, and people would die as well. The night before the terrible event, the morning was already dawning. I heard terrifying voices and noises. I went outside to see what was going on in the street. I saw that the angels, walking in the dark, arguing about me. Lot must also die on the day of judgment in Sodom and Gomorrah. Some angels replied, his life must be saved because Abraham prayed for him. Another angel said, he also lived and worked for the will of God. As they argued with each other, I felt how the fear were overwhelming me. Suddenly, an angel noticed me. He looked at me and said, leave this place as soon as possible and take your 2 younger daughters with you, because you are responsible for their sins. I am an angel of death. I'll protect your life because Abraham received a mission. Otherwise, you would have to die together with the evil people of Sodom and Gomorrah. I took my 2 daughters and immediately made my way to the small town of Zoar, where only 70 people lived. Later, I was so scared that I lived in a cave in the mountains. I stayed there until I could overcome my fear, but even in this cave I repeated my sins. I drank alcohol and slept with my daughters again. This time, something worse happened. Both of them got pregnant by me. Now I completely lost all of my spirituality. I no longer received a message from God and the heavens. There was no revelation, nor was I able to see any dream. That's why I didn't want to see you anymore. If you hadn't found out where I live, I would never have looked for you again on earth. I know that I'm responsible for the downfall of Sodom and Gomorrah, my family and people. If I had more willpower and had only stood on God's side, this tragedy would not have happened. I failed. I am also the reason why my people turned away from your mission God gave you. O Abraham, my life became hell. I didn't know what to do from this point on. I asked Lot, what did you tell the people of this little town about your daughters? I mean, how do they relate to you? Lot replied, here people think that they are my 2 young wives. I said to him, stop it now, otherwise the heavens will punish us even more. I will take care of your 2 daughters who both gave birth to boys. I took Lot's daughters to Canaan. Lot didn't want to come with me. I still supported him financially so that he could survive. When I returned to Canaan, I married both daughters to 2 of my followers. I said to both of them, forget your past and start a new life with your husbands. Later on, I lost contact with Lot as he settled down further east. He lived as an unknown man for the rest of his life. Today, he is in a lower middle spiritual world. I met him once, and even there he repents his actions and accuses himself. He was a chosen person for the mission. I adopted him as my own son and loved him as much as Ismael and Isaac, but he did not unite with me to lay the foundation for God's mission. It was very important for me to talk about my relationship with Lot and about his life.